On January 28, 2022, a 447-foot steel bridge in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, collapsed without warning, dropping 6 vehicles nearly 100 feet into the park below. 4 people were hospitalized. When federal investigators from the NTSB examined the wreckage, they found the cause wasn't an earthquake, an overloaded truck, or a design flaw. The transverse tie plate, a critical structural member, had been eaten alive by corrosion. Decades of accumulated water and debris had prevented the steel from forming even a basic protective patina. The rust simply consumed the metal until there was nothing left to hold the bridge together. That collapse wasn't an anomaly. According to NACE International, the world's leading corrosion research body, the annual cost of corrosion in the United States alone exceeds $276 billion. Globally, the figure reaches $2.5 trillion, roughly 3.4% of the entire planet's GDP. Rust is, quite literally, one of the most expensive problems in human civilization. And yet, there is a chemistry, simple, cheap, and proven across 2,000 years of human history, that converts rust itself into a stable, protective armor at the molecular level. A chemistry that the US military has relied on continuously since World War II and still specifies in active military standards today. A chemistry that costs about as much as a cup of coffee. It's called phosphate conversion, and the reason most people have never heard of it has nothing to do with whether it works. Welcome to Historia Prime. Today we're going to trace this chemistry from ancient forges to classified wartime shipyards, understand exactly how it works at the molecular level, and I'm going to teach you how to apply it yourself. Let's go.
Welcome to Historia Prime, where we explore the fascinating history of phosphate.
Part 1. From ancient forges to modern chemistry. The principle behind phosphate conversion, the idea that iron, when exposed to certain acids, forms a darkened, corrosion-resistant surface, is genuinely ancient, and it emerged independently in multiple civilizations, which tells us something important about how fundamental this chemistry really is. Roman metalworkers in the 2nd and 3rd centuries observed that iron tools accidentally dropped into tanning vats often came out darkened and more resistant to rust than untreated iron stored in the same workshop. Now, here's a nuance that matters. The active chemistry in those tanning vats was tannic acid, not phosphoric acid. Tannic acid reacts with iron to form iron tannate, a different compound from the iron phosphate we'll be discussing today, but one that also creates a protective darkened layer. The Romans didn't understand the chemistry. They simply noticed that dark iron survived while bright iron rotted, so they kept doing it. Meanwhile, in West Africa, iron smelters working within the Nok and Bantu metallurgical traditions developed their own approach. After forging blades and agricultural tools, they washed the finished metal in acidic baths, made from fermented bark and fruit pulps. Archaeological analysis has confirmed phosphate residues on iron artifacts recovered from sub-Saharan sites dating back over 1,000 years. Whether these specific plant extracts contained phosphoric compounds or relied on a related acid chemistry, the practical result was the same: darkened, more durable iron. In feudal Japan, master swordsmiths applied acidic clay slurries containing volcanic mineral compounds to blade surfaces during the final tempering stages. This created distinctive surface patterns that sword collectors still prize today. But those patterns weren't just decorative. They were evidence of a chemical conversion layer that enhanced corrosion resistance. 4 distinct metallurgical traditions, 4 different continents, 4 independent discoveries that acid-treated iron resists decay. They weren't reading each other's research papers. They were simply paying attention to what happened when iron met acid. Scientists call this convergent discovery, when separate cultures independently arrive at the same practical solution because the underlying chemistry is so fundamental that anyone who works extensively with iron will eventually encounter it. Nature itself performs a version of this chemistry. At waterlogged archaeological sites like the Roman fort of Vindolanda in northern England, researchers have found iron artifacts remarkably preserved under a blue-black mineral coating. That mineral is vivianite, hydrated iron phosphate, formed naturally when phosphorus released from decaying organic matter in the anaerobic soil reacts with the corroding iron. Vivianite creates a stable barrier that inhibits further corrosion, effectively sealing the metal for centuries. The same chemical family that ancient smiths stumbled upon accidentally, nature has been applying on its own timetable all along. Part 2. The birth of industrial phosphating. For most of human history, this knowledge remained craft wisdom, passed down through apprenticeships, never formally documented. That changed in 1869 when a British inventor named William Alexander Ross filed British Patent 3119, the first formal patent for a phosphatizing process. What had been centuries of blacksmith intuition became reproducible, documented industrial chemistry in a single filing. In 1906, Thomas Watts Coslett of Birmingham, England, improved upon Ross's work by using phosphoric acid as the primary reagent and secured both a British and American patent. Then, in 1912, an inventor named Frank Rupert Granville Richards filed a US patent for a manganese phosphating process that produced an even darker, thicker, more durable coating, one that held lubricating oil exceptionally well. But the man who truly industrialized this chemistry was an American entrepreneur named Clark W. Parker. Parker wasn't a university scientist. He was a tinkerer who ran chemical experiments in his family kitchen in Detroit, Michigan. He acquired the Coslett and Richards patents, and together with his son Wyman, founded the Parker Rust-Proof Phosphating Company of America in 1915. The process they commercialized became so widely known that it acquired their family name, Parkerizing. By the late 1920s, the Parker Company had dramatically improved the speed and reliability of their process. But there was a strategic vulnerability they couldn't ignore. Manganese, the key ingredient in their formula, was expensive and almost entirely imported from India, South Africa, and the Soviet Union. During peacetime, that was manageable, but the Parker chemists saw the storm gathering in Europe throughout the 1930s, and they understood that wartime supply chains would collapse. So they developed a zinc-based alternative. America had massive domestic zinc reserves in Missouri, Tennessee, and Montana. By 1941, a Parker Company chemist named Darcy refined the zinc phosphating process by adding trace amounts of copper and chlorate, which drastically lowered the operating temperature. This made mass application practical at enormous scale. Now, here's an irony worth noting. Clark Parker and his son Wyman were both convicted of investor fraud in the late 1920s and went to prison. But chemistry, unlike reputation, doesn't care about the character of the person who discovers it. The patents remained valid, the process continued to improve, and the stage was set for the largest military mobilization in human history. Part 3. 1942. When rust became a strategic enemy. When the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, the United States was suddenly fighting a two-front war across some of the most corrosive environments on Earth. The Pacific Theater combined salt water, tropical humidity, and extreme heat into what corrosion engineers call a severe marine environment, one of the most aggressive conditions that steel can face. An unprotected hull plate in warm seawater can begin losing structural integrity within months. At the same time, the War Production Board had severely restricted the use of critical alloying elements, chromium, nickel, and tin, reserving them exclusively for aircraft engines and heavy armor plate. This meant that standard infantry weapons, vehicle frames, and naval hardware were being manufactured from plain carbon steel with minimal inherent corrosion resistance. The military needed a surface treatment that was fast to apply, extremely cheap, tolerant of imperfect field conditions, and capable of withstanding constant salt spray exposure. Phosphate conversion coating met every single requirement. The scale of application was staggering. Every M1 Garand rifle, every 1911 pistol, every M1 carbine, tank track links, submarine components, watertight door hinges, all received this chemical treatment. The military codified the process under specifications like MIL-DTL-16232, which remains an active military standard to this day. Perhaps the most vivid example of this coating in action was the Smith & Wesson Victory model revolver. In mid-1940, the Navy realized it couldn't get enough 1911 pistols to arm all its personnel, so it turned to Smith & Wesson for a secondary sidearm, the .38 Special Military and Police Revolver. Early production Victory models had a traditional commercial blued finish, but bluing is merely a thin, controlled oxide layer that offers minimal real protection against salt spray. The Navy quickly discovered that a blued gun in a damp, salty cockpit was a liability, so they mandated a change. The new Victory models, distinguished by a V prefix on the serial number and a lanyard ring on the butt, were sandblasted and parkerized. The phosphate coating created a thick, micro-porous layer that held rust-preventative oil like a sponge. Approximately 352,000 Victory model revolvers were produced for US forces during the war, and they became the standard issue sidearm for Navy and Marine Corps aviators throughout the Pacific theater. Many aircrews preferred the lighter revolver to the heavier 1911, especially in the confined space of a cockpit with a shoulder holster. Marine fighter ace Gregory "Pappy" Boyington, commander of the VMF 214 Black Sheep Squadron, credited with 28 aerial victories and recipient of the Medal of Honor, carried a parkerized Victory .38 as his personal sidearm. According to period accounts, Boyington was known to use that same reliable revolver to shoot out the lights at the officers' club after a few too many drinks. The gun kept working regardless of what its owner put it through, which is perhaps the best testimonial for phosphate coating anyone could ask for. Remarkably, the Victory model remained in active US military service for decades, through Korea, Vietnam, and as late as Operation Desert Storm in 1991, with Air National Guard tanker and transport crews. That's nearly 50 years of continuous service from a wartime revolver, protected by a coating that cost pennies to apply. Part 4. The science. How rust becomes armor. So what exactly happens when phosphoric acid meets rusted steel? Understanding this mechanism is what separates someone who blindly follows instructions from someone who truly controls the process. Iron, in its refined metallic state, is thermodynamically unstable. It wants to return to a lower energy state. When exposed to oxygen and water, it oxidizes, forming hydrated ferric oxides, which we call red rust. This rust is porous and expansive, occupying up to 6 times the volume of the original base metal. That expansion is what causes paint to blister and flake, a process engineers call rust jacking. The coating lifts from below and the cycle accelerates. Now, when you introduce phosphoric acid, H3PO4, you're introducing what chemists call a triprotic acid. Each molecule can donate 3 hydrogen ions in a stepwise fashion. This unique structure allows it to dissolve unstable iron oxides selectively, without aggressively attacking the healthy steel underneath. When the acid contacts the rust, it triggers what's known as a topochemical reaction, a reaction that occurs at the exact boundary between 2 phases. The phosphoric acid donates a phosphate group to the iron atoms in the rust. The simplified equation is Fe2O3 plus 2H3PO4 yields 2FePO4 plus 3H2O. Iron oxide plus phosphoric acid yields iron phosphate plus water. That's the entire reaction. The porous, flaking, orange corrosion that was eating your metal is molecularly reorganized into a dense, dark, crystalline matrix of iron phosphate. The new layer is dielectric, meaning it interrupts the flow of electrical current, effectively short-circuiting the electrochemical corrosion cycle that drives further rusting. The converted surface also has a distinctive texture, roughly comparable to 320 grit sandpaper at the microscopic level. This microporosity isn't a flaw, it's a feature. If you apply paint or oil over this surface, it grips with dramatically greater tenacity than it would on smooth, bare metal. You're not just covering up the problem, you've permanently transformed the corrosion itself into a stable foundation. Part 5. Why nobody told you. The economics of indifference. If this chemistry is cheap, effective, and has been proven for over a century, a fair question emerges. Why isn't it on every shelf in every hardware store? Why aren't contractors and homeowners using it as a default? The answer isn't a conspiracy. It's structural economics. And honestly, it's more interesting than a conspiracy would be. The global paints and coatings industry generates over $200 billion in annual revenue. Companies like Sherwin-Williams, PPG Industries, and AkzoNobel are publicly traded corporations with hundreds of thousands of employees, massive R&D budgets, and sophisticated marketing operations. Their business model depends on repeat purchase cycles. Paint wears off, primers degrade, rust-inhibiting sprays require reapplication every 6 to 12 months. Every coat that fails is another sale. Every surface that rusts again is another trip to the store. Now consider phosphoric acid. It's a naturally occurring compound. It cannot be patented. Because no one holds exclusive rights to it, no company can charge a premium price. Without premium pricing, there's no margin to fund marketing campaigns, to buy premium shelf space at Home Depot, or to sponsor the kind of lobbying required to get a product listed in the International Building Code. The International Residential Code, the document that dictates how homes are built across America, does not list phosphoric acid conversion as an approved corrosion treatment for exposed structural steel. Not because it was tested and found inferior, but because no corporation has the financial incentive to pay for the expensive testing and bureaucratic process required to get it included. Let me be clear about what this is and isn't. This is not a boardroom of executives scheming to hide a product from you. This is the predictable outcome of how markets work when a solution is unpatentable. When nobody can own the chemistry, nobody funds the marketing. When nobody funds the marketing, the product becomes invisible to mainstream consumers, even if it outperforms the alternatives in specific applications. Now let me steelman the commercial products for a moment, because this is important. Off-the-shelf rust primers and spray coatings have real advantages. They're convenient, they require zero technical knowledge, they come with manufacturer warranties, and they meet building code requirements that contractors need for liability coverage. If you're a professional contractor building to code, or a homeowner who wants a spray-and-go solution with no learning curve, commercial products make perfect sense. Phosphoric acid conversion is a better fit for the hands-on person who's willing to learn a process and apply it carefully, and who values long-term performance over convenience. Part 6. Dye rust conversion. The step-by-step protocol. Here's where we put knowledge into your hands. I'm going to walk you through the exact process, the same fundamental chemistry that the US military codified over 80 years ago. Step 1. Source the acid. Walk into any hardware store. Head to the cleaning aisle or the concrete and masonry section. Look for products labeled Rust Converter. metal prep, or concrete etcher. The brand name Phosphate is popular, but the brand doesn't matter. Turn the bottle around and check the label. You want a concentration between 10% and 30% phosphoric acid. A single quart will cost you under $10 and will treat dozens of square feet of surface area. Step 2. Surface preparation. This is the golden rule. Take a wire brush or stiff bristle brush and aggressively knock off any loose, chunky, flaking rust scale. You must remove the loose debris because the acid can't penetrate through thick, unattached crust. But here's the critical secret most people get wrong. Do not sand down to bare, shiny metal. Leave the tight, adherent surface rust intact. The phosphoric acid needs the iron oxide. It feeds on it. The rust is the raw material that gets converted into your armor. If you strip it all the way to bare metal, you've destroyed the very substrate the acid needs to work with. Also, wipe the surface with acetone or a similar solvent to remove any oil or grease that would block the acid from making contact. Step 3. Application. Using a cheap foam brush, a cotton rag, or a standard plastic pump sprayer, apply a thin, even coat of the phosphoric acid solution directly onto the rusted surface. Keep the surface visibly wet for the entire reaction period, typically 15 to 30 minutes. If you're working outside on a hot day and it starts drying out, mist it with a little more acid or water to keep the reaction alive. Within minutes, you'll see the chemistry happen in real time. The ugly orange-brown rust darkens to a muddy gray, then progressively shifts to a deep, permanent blue-black. You're watching iron oxide transform into iron phosphate. Step 4. Cure and second coat. Let the treated surface cure undisturbed for 2 to 4 hours. Don't touch it, don't rinse it. The phosphate matrix needs this time to fully crystallize and interlock with the steel substrate. Once cured, apply a second, lighter coat. The first coat handles the bulk of the conversion, but the second penetrates into hidden pits, microscopic crevices, and weld seams to catch any unconverted oxide that's hiding out of sight. Step 5. Neutralize and seal. This is where amateurs fail, and it's the difference between a lasting result and premature failure. Once the second coat has cured and the metal is totally black, you must neutralize the residual acid. If you leave unreacted acid on the surface, it will cause flash rusting or make your paint peel off later. Mix a simple solution of baking soda and warm water. Spray or wipe it over the metal. You might see slight fizzing as the base neutralizes the remaining acid. Then rinse with clean water. Immediately dry the metal completely using a heat gun, blow dryer, or compressed air. Do not let water sit on this freshly passivated surface. Once it's bone dry, your conversion is complete. For indoor applications, you can leave the surface as is. For outdoor use, you now have the ideal microporous foundation to apply primer, paint, or a heavy protective oil. Part 7. Honest limitations. When this isn't enough. I need to be straightforward with you about where this method has real boundaries, because your safety matters more than any YouTube video. Phosphoric acid converts existing rust into a stable layer, but it does not restore metal that's already been lost. If corrosion has eaten through the cross-section of a structural member, a load-bearing beam, a vehicle frame rail, a bridge component, no chemical conversion will give you that metal back. That's when you need a professional welder or structural engineer, full stop. This process works on ferrous metals, steel and iron. It does not work on aluminium, stainless steel, galvanized surfaces, or copper alloys. Using it on the wrong substrate wastes your time and may damage the surface. For pressurized systems, gas lines, hydraulic systems, pressure vessels, always get a professional inspection. A conversion coating addresses surface corrosion, but it cannot tell you whether the remaining wall thickness is safe for the pressures the system carries. And for any structural element in a building or bridge, columns, beams, connections, the governing building codes require specific approved treatments applied by licensed professionals. Phosphoric acid conversion, however effective, is not currently code approved for structural applications. Using it in place of a code-required treatment can create liability issues and genuine safety risk. Think of this method as what it is: a powerful, proven tool for the right applications. Tools, vehicles, outdoor furniture, fences, workshop equipment, and any non-structural metalwork where long-term corrosion protection at low cost is the priority. Let's return to where we started. In Pittsburgh, a bridge fell because rust was allowed to consume a critical steel member unchecked for decades. The NTSB investigation found that repeated maintenance recommendations had been documented in inspection reports, and the city failed to act on them. The chemistry to protect that steel has existed since before anyone alive today was born. The failure wasn't a gap in knowledge, it was a gap in attention. The Department of Defense still specifies phosphate conversion coating under MIL-DTL-16232 as an active military standard. Every M1 Garand sitting in a museum collection is still wearing the dark grey armour applied over 80 years ago. The military never stopped using this chemistry. It simply faded from mainstream consumer awareness, not because anyone buried it, but because a solution that nobody can patent is a solution that nobody will market. Now you understand the history, the chemistry, the military specifications, and the exact methodology.